Thank you for coming out. It was my second speech this morning, so I think I'm hoping I get better. I don't know, but we'll see. I have a little bit of a raspy voice. When I talk about healthcare, I like to start with a couple of premises, or a couple of things that I say we should start with before we move forward. Number one, I think we have great quality of care in our country. If you look at foreign leaders who get an unusual cancer, you just don't see many of them flying down to Cuba to get their cancer treated. You know, Michael Moore might say Cuba's a great place to go, and as far as I'm concerned, Michael Moore can go down and stay. But you don't see leaders of foreign dignitaries or wealthy people from the world have an unusual cancer. You'll see them come to Boston, New York, Mayo, Louisville, Lexington. You'll see them come to our country, but you don't see them going to these other countries. So I think we have great quality of care. The other thing we have in our system is we have 100% access to emergency care. If you fall leaving here and you fall and you break your arm and you go to the emergency room, you will be treated regardless of your ability to pay. This was true even before we had government, to tell you the truth. I mean, most of the government programs started in the 60s. In 1955, if you fell in Lexington, a doctor would treat you in a hospital. We've always had charity hospitals. We've always had emergency care for people. It's the way we've treated people in our country. So I would say that's where we start the debate. We have good quality. We have 100% access. So let's talk about at least some positives before we get to the negatives. The healthcare debate in Washington is being driven by the access problem. I think there are two aspects to healthcare problems. One is the expense, and one is access. We don't have perfect access to elective care. They say there are 46 million people without insurance. But you know, the interesting thing about it is, of those 46 million doesn't mean they don't have access to health care. It means they've got to pay cash for their health care. They don't have health insurance. But the question is, you look at the 46 million, you have to ask yourself, who are they and how would we fix the problem? A third of them are eligible for Medicaid and haven't signed up. Why don't they sign up? Because we have 100% access in the emergency room. They've got a cold, they can show up in the emergency room. They clog up the emergency room, but they have access. And they're not bothering to sign up for a government program that already exists. A third of them make more than $50,000 a year, and they're not buying insurance because of the expense. So they're not really part of the access part of the problem. They're part of the expense part. They're not buying it because it's expensive. They make more than $50,000 a year, probably they do pay most of the time when they go to the doctor. Their problem is if they have a catastrophe, they have no insurance. 20% of the 46 million have come into this country illegally. And I don't think we should drive the debate for giving and making this security net larger by people who broke the law to come into our country. A third of the 46 million also are without insurance for less than a year. They're young people. They're getting their first job out of college or high school. They're in between their first and their second job, and they get insurance within a year. So I think they've made this 46 million this overwhelming thing, and it's like nobody's talking about the 85 to 90% who have insurance. What I hear from my patients is not the access problem. I hear the expense problem. I hear people paying $1,000 a month or more sometimes for their insurance. I hear about the people who have no insurance because it is so expensive and they can't get it. I hear about people who have pre-existing conditions and can't get it. Or I hear about the portability problem that they wish they had it and could pay for it, but they're in between jobs and their insurance is tied to their employment and they don't like it. So I think the problem is an expense problem more than it is an access problem. How do we fix the expense problem? Why is it broken? You have to look at healthcare and say, what's wrong with healthcare and why is it different than every other facet of our economy? Well, some say, oh, well, it can't be like capitalism or it can't be like a marketplace because you can't negotiate for your heart attack price, you know, when you go to the ER. Well, you can't, but 95% of healthcare is elective and done in a non-emergent fashion. And that you could. All of your routine daily care, you could be negotiating a price. But you don't. If we were to magically double the amount of doctors next week, double the amount of eye surgeons doing eye surgery, the price would not come down at all. Because most of eye surgery is people over 65, and I charge the same price as they do in Montana because the government sets the price. So the marketplace doesn't work. there is no supply and demand, and there is no reduction of prices based on people trying to compete for your business. There is no price competition. So when people say, oh, capitalism has failed us in healthcare and the private practice is not working, it is failing, or it's not working perfectly, but it's because it's not capitalism. I have private ownership and I can make a profit, and that's good, but there is no price competition. Even if you come to me, about 55% of what I do is paid for by the government. About 40% is private insurance. So you come to me and you have Blue Cross, Humana, United, you still charge the same. Because I've made a deal with the insurance company, and so has everyone else in Lexington and Bowling Green. You don't make a decision to go to see your doctor based on price. Some people say, oh, you don't want to do that. It's different than Walmart or whatever. It's a little bit, but it's like a service, and services have quality, but they also should have a price component to it. If they did, we'd have competition. And people say, well, that never works. There are two things I do in my practice that people pay primarily cash for. The price has gone down every year for 15 years. Contact lenses, it's about $4 a contact in my office, almost the same as Walmart. Why? Because I have to compete. In my practice that people pay primarily cash for, the price has gone down every year for 15 years. Contact lenses, it's about $4 a contact in my office, almost the same as Walmart. Why? Because I have to compete. I don't want to be the same as Walmart. I wish I could charge as much. Everybody in business wishes you could charge whatever you want. You can't because there's competition. LASIK surgery, it's much more expensive, but people still pay cash for LASIK surgery, and the price has gone down every year for 15 years. Competition works. You need to figure out how to get competition and capitalism into healthcare. Well, this debate is almost like it's way over the head of anybody in Washington, because they're not even having this debate. Their whole debate is, how much government are we going to add to the system? I say the primary question you have to ask before you even get started is, what's wrong? Is it because we have too much capitalism or too little capitalism? Is it because we have too much government already or too little government? You have to start the debate at the beginning to decide which direction to go. I think there are some answers. One of the answers is what I have. I have a health savings account. So I pay a lot less for my insurance than people who have low deductibles. But even mine, my prices are rising dramatically. I have a $5,000 deductible, and my prices are going up 17% a year for my premiums, even though I pay for 99.9% of my health care through cash. But if everyone had health savings accounts, you would pay cash. You'd learn to appreciate your dollar like you do in every other facet of the economy, and you would drive prices down. People say, I don't want to pay. I like my $10 copay. If you like your $10 copay, don't complain about your $1,000 a month premiums. Because that's why you have low copays, you have high premiums. The other thing about it is it's, and this is counterintuitive to people, but if you were forced to pay $150 for your doctor's visit, but we took away price controls, or we didn't set the prices any longer, you would force the prices down. Because let's say you're diabetic and you have to go every year to see an ophthalmologist. You would choose it maybe based on quality, but you might say, well, I've heard good things about this person too, and you might call and say, well, he charges $130 or she charges $120. Price competition works, and it would work in healthcare. We have to figure out how to bring it in. Well, how do you help things like pre-existing conditions or portability? I say we tie the insurance to the individual and not to the employment. I say we try to make health insurance more like term life insurance. I have term life insurance, and if I have a heart attack today and I survive, my term life insurance doesn't go up because I have a multi-year contract. I have a 20-year contract for my term life insurance. It's based on my age, and it goes up a little bit every year, but it is not going to have anything to do with my pre-existing condition of now having a heart attack. But my health insurance, even though I have a $5,000 deductible, if I have a heart attack today and I survive, they'll triple my rates next year because I have a 1-year health insurance plan and I'm part of a small pool of 3 employees. We need to allow people greater access to larger pools. You should allow me to buy it through some association of physicians nationwide. You should allow insurance to be sold across state lines. You should allow more competition. You should allow more and expansive health savings accounts. They're limited. I think I have the highest one, but there's no reason why some people might buy $10,000 and $20,000 ones. Let's say you're one of the people who make more than $50,000 a year and you buy no insurance. it is smart to have insurance. Everybody should have some kind of catastrophic insurance. But let's say you want to take a chance on $20,000 deductible. You might be able to get a $30,000 deductible. And people say, oh, that's crazy. Well, you might get it for $300 a year, and you might make that trade-off of paying $300, $400, $500 a year to have a very high deductible. And then you might, if you got hit with a $20,000 bill, you might borrow money for that, or you might do whatever it takes, or the same way with your car. We don't prepay our car repairs. We pay for it as we go, and we have insurance against catastrophe with our car, a large automobile accident. There are ways around this question. There are ways to fix health care that involve bringing capitalism into it, bringing the profit incentive into it. It works everywhere else. Why can you go to Walmart and buy a Go phone for $14? Because people pay cash. In healthcare, consumers and patients have become disconnected to the product. We need to connect the consumer to the product where they pay directly for it. It's not that we won't have insurance. You still will need insurance for higher items, but we need to develop a marketplace. But like I said, it already works a little bit with health savings accounts. I used to be at a multi-specialty clinic, and it was $12,000 for insurance. But I chose to keep my health savings account. I have my 3 kids and all of us on for a little over $4,000. And for many of the last 10 years, I was under $4,000 a year for health insurance with a high deductible. And it works. But we have to figure out how to make it work. We also have to figure out how to bring that marketplace in. One of the interesting things is in my practice, nobody cares about the price. I don't largely, and neither do the patients, because no one's paying. But you know who does care about the price? And the only time that I really go overboard to try to care about the price is if you have no health insurance. Because then you come in and I will try to negotiate a rate. And I have many people. We have Mennonites in our area. They're good people, and for religious reasons, they don't buy insurance. I try to work with them. They actually know how to do it. They call up and say, I need this done, and what does he charge, and what will he charge if I pay him in advance, pay him at the time. There are some advantages to me. I don't have to file insurance and do this, and I try to charge them a comparable rate. But you know what? The system's kind of broken. If you go to the hospital and you have no insurance, you know what they charge you? 4 times what everybody else gets charged, because what they do, and what many doctors do, is we charge a really large amount as our charges because we don't want to miss anything that an insurance company might pay us. We don't know sometimes exactly what they'll pay us, so we'll charge $2,000 for cataract surgery, but Medicare might pay $600, and Blue Cross might pay $700, or Humana. But then you come in, you have no insurance, you get a $2,000 bill. It's not very fair. On a personal basis, I try to make it fair, but the hospitals sometimes don't understand that. And then sometimes there's rules that say, well, that could be fraud if you're not sticking to what your actual prices are. Now, I do it in my clinic through Alliance Eye Clinic, so I try to take care of people who don't have insurance, and I give them a lower price. And I can do that legally, I think, because it's a charity program and we have them sign up for it. But we need to change some rules. It's illegal in many states for doctors to publish the rates. Just dumb. We need to change those rules. We need to change the tax structure. We need to allow more health savings accounts. In Obama's plan, though, they have health care exchanges where only certain insurances will be sold. We did that in 1994 in our state. We had health care reform. 35 out of 37 insurance companies left the state and quit selling. Where are they going to go, though, if we make the whole country that way? In the bill, they are taking away tax incentives for health savings accounts and letting you use health savings accounts less under Obama's bill. They say they're not going to take my insurance away, but if I lose it or want to change companies, all of a sudden, guess what? It's not approved because they have to be approved. They also want to make insurance where everybody pays the same. It's this Cuban type of idea, this egalitarian idea that everyone should pay the same. So if I work out every day and walk and eat carefully and I'm not a diabetic and don't smoke, I still have to pay the same as someone who's not taking care of themselves. But they're going to mandate that by the government. They asked Nancy Pelosi recently, well, where do you get the constitutional justification for health care, dealing with health care? And Nancy Pelosi said, what? She was, the what? The Constitution. And she finally said, oh, the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause is good for everything. They asked, Judge Napolitano asked Representative Clyburn, he's a representative from South Carolina, about this, and he said, well, Most of the things we do up here are not approved by the Constitution. He just readily admitted that it really has nothing to do with governing anymore. It's about majority rule. If they have 51 votes in the Senate, they get it. So we have to think about changes that are outside the box. So far outside the box, it's not just opposing Obamacare. It's talking about what should we propose as conservatives or Republicans or independents. What should we propose in Washington? And some of the things I'm talking about, you don't even hear the Republicans talking about. We need someone up there who will talk about market reforms and the way we can allow the marketplace and capitalism to function. It functions everywhere else, and there's no reason why we can't get it to work in healthcare. Thank you very much. I don't think we have a microphone from the floor, but if you'll speak up, I think we can do it that way.
Dr. Paul, I'm in healthcare and I like what you're saying. My question for you is, if I give you my vote or even some of my time for your campaign, what are you going to do when you get into office that makes your voice heard when it feels like our voice isn't heard right now?
You may not win every legislative battle. I mean, the Republicans are winning no battles right now. But I think that's why the way you grow your movement and the way you become a majority party is by being loud, by being vocal, by being on television and talking about our ideas, articulating our ideas. Obama won because he could articulate his ideas, or whatever change meant, but he sounded good when he did it. We need people like that that can present our message, but we also need to stick to our guns. We need to be forthright. We need to present our message clearly, but we need to stay with it and not, as soon as you get up there, just do anything and go along with everything. And that's where we've gotten in trouble. I mean, the Medicare prescription drug plan's a disaster, but it was passed by Republicans. We don't have the money for it. Medicare is short of money because of demographics. There are more older people now than there used to be, and less young people working. The demographics aren't working. So it's disingenuous of them to say, oh, $874 billion Bacchus bill, public option, is not going to cost anything. They're kind of telling stuff that's not true, so we need to point it out, stick to our guns, articulate our message enough to bring people that we can get new people in office. I mean, we need to retain this Senate seat. It's in Republican hands, but we need more. And if I'm able to win this seat, I will help others to win the seat. David and I are already, David's got me organized to help a state senator, Jimmy Higdon, running over in Bardstown area. We're going to do a fundraiser for him in 2 weeks. We want to help to grow the party, but we want to do it by adhering to the platform and not by saying, oh, let's just be like the Democrats. Let's be the Democrats light, and that way we'll get people to like us. I say our ideas are good. Let's articulate them and stand by them.
I wanted to make a comment that as I'm approaching retirement, I have found out that, well, no, now it looks like it's going to be 20 years. But I find that if I do not sign up for Medicare once I do retire and wish to stay with a private insurance company, that I forfeit my Social Security payments. And furthermore, that if I have received any Social Security payments, that my bank account will be garnished to refund the government any Social Security payment. This is passed under George Bush. I don't know if a lot of you know about this, but I did want to call your attention to, and everyone's attention to, the fact that there is a lawsuit that is going on to sue the government about the constitutionality of forcing senior citizens into the Medicare program by force and coercion, and that if you would like to learn more about it, you could contact the Cato Institute, because on a personal note, Ed Crane who is the CEO of the Cato Institute, did support this, and I'm sure that you could contact them and find out who these people are if you would like to support their campaign to win that.
And there's a Lexington attorney involved, correct?
Yes, I think that's correct.
Kent Masterson Brown is from Lexington, and I think he's the attorney on this.
Well, I'm sorry for my English not good enough. When you talk about cost on insurance, I believe it's a priority. Everybody can buy medical insurance. When I came to this country 18 years ago, I started making $5.50, and we spent $380 a month a month for family insurance. Here it's priority. Somebody wants medical insurance, somebody wants 46-inch TV. Somebody that's true. Somebody wants to go in the bar and have drink and watch ball game. Somebody wants to take care of his family. It's my opinion. And second, I believe it's not fair. Cuba. You can compare England, Germany, France to the United States. This will be fair. Because all dictators not go to Europe, they came to the United States. And all people who have money not go to Europe, they came to the United States. One example, former President Azerbaijan, Gaydar Aliyev, in the Cleveland. He not went to Britain, or Canada, or France, or Germany. He came to the United States.
Very good
the best
point.
medical insurance or medical care in the entire world.
Very good point. Very good. And one of the things about comparing us to either Canada or Europe are waiting lines. In Canada, at any point in time, over 1 million people are waiting in line. There's a small town in Canada that has one family doctor, and they have a lottery to determine when you get in to see them. If you are high in the lottery, it might be 6 or 7 months. If you're low in the lottery, it could be 3 years. Eye surgeons in Canada finish their allotment by October, and they just come for 2 months, and some of them come down here, have a license down here and do surgery here for 2 months, so they can go back and start over their allotment of eye surgeries. It's a crazy system. In England, they have a NICE commission, sort of inappropriately named, but it has determined how much you're worth in the last 6 months of your life. And it's like it's an exact amount. It's $26,000. And if your chemotherapy costs more than that, you don't get it. All government programs, because they're free, get overutilized, and they're always short of money. They're not free because you pay higher taxes in Europe and Canada. They get overutilized, meaning everybody goes all the time because there's not a disincentive to go, you don't pay. And because of that, they're short of money. And so then they have to have, they call it cost controls, but if it's your health care, it's rationing. They ration what they can give out because there's not enough money. We already are short of money in Medicare in this country. Every year there's a pinch on whether or not to cut doctors' fees again. My fees are half of what they were 15 years ago. Every year there's more pressure to cut, but this is without 46 million more people they're going to add to the system. It cannot be done. They cannot do it without adding to the deficit. You will either add more in prices to your premiums or more in taxes.
Dr. Paul, do you believe the tort reform idea is legitimate as far as the healthcare debate?
Yes, and I think tort reform should be part of it. I think, though, it has to be done in Frankfurt, not Washington. If you get sued as a doctor, they sue you in state court. State court is under state jurisdiction. Federal court is under Congress. So I don't know that you can stop lawsuits or do anything to them in Washington. It really needs to be done in Frankfurt. But there are egregious examples. John Edwards made $100 million suing doctors over cerebral palsy, and there's not any medical evidence that has anything to do with the birthing process. You can have a 20-minute delivery, perfect delivery, no problems, and the baby can have profound cerebral palsy, or you could have a difficult delivery. They only sue when you have a difficult delivery, and then they tell you, oh, the doctor should have done a C-section, that's why the baby has cerebral palsy. It's a sad state when it happens, but there's once again a private way to help those individuals. We should have some sort of no-fault insurance that when you become pregnant, you go for your first prenatal visit, and for $25 you could probably get insurance. Because so many people would buy it, because everybody would fear that, but it's maybe 1 in 100,000 babies has a profound neurologic disorder, but then we wouldn't just sort of be pointing fingers. There are doctors in my town who pay $100,000 for malpractice insurance, OBs.
What is your thought, and what do you do in your practice on the Advantage Care plans? I know I have doctors, I have emphysema, and my pulmonologist won't even accept Advantage Care.
Yeah, I do take it, and I think it is just another product, and we should allow more products. But that's the way the Democrats are supposedly saving money, is they're going to end Advantage Care, which patients have chosen because I guess there must be benefits that patients see to it, either an expense or whatever. And it does pay, I think, doctors a little bit less, but the trade-off is like any HMO. Like, let's say I want to deal with Humana or not, but Humana's got 5,000 people in my city, so I make a deal with them and I say, yeah, I'll take Humana for a slightly lower rate. And that is a bit of a marketplace. I think it's imperfect, but the Democrats are going to get rid of those programs. The Democrats and I'm going to just say something strong. The Democrats hate individual responsibility. They don't want health savings accounts. They despise health savings accounts. They despise things like Medicare Advantage, which have some patient choice involved. They think you're too stupid to take care of yourselves, and that Big Brother needs to do it for you, and you need the all-encompassing Big Brother. And that's the difference between the parties. We may need to make it a stark difference and present it to the public. Exactly.
I kind of briefly to a good question. I have an HSA, and I agree with what you're saying about how it brings consumerism into healthcare. But a big thing that the mainstream media says about HSAs is that it discourages preventive care, and it's just a tax shelter for the rich. If someone from the mainstream media, like MSNBC, were asking you that question, how would you defend HSAs?
What I would
question: how would you defend HSAs?
What I would say is that I have employees in my practice that I gave them a choice. I was at a big multi-specialty clinic, and the insurance cost $12,000. I was an owner, so I paid $10,000 of it, and the employees paid $2,000. When they came to work for me, I gave them a choice, because the clinic will always keep you if you work there. But I went out on my own, and I said, you can come with me. I'll give you a $2,000 raise, a $1,500 deductible, and I won't make you pay any premiums. So they saved the $2,000 in premiums. They got $2,000 more in salary. They're $4,000 ahead, but I came out $8,000 ahead. They got $4,000 and I got $4,000. All of those things exist out there, and my employees are not wealthy people. You know, they're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They're not rich people. But they made the choice to come with me, you know, to do that. And I think economically they came out. They have to now be individually responsible to pay their $1,500 and to try to save in their health savings accounts. But I think at every economic level a health savings account works, you know. But we've trained people the opposite way. We've trained people to want lower and lower deductibles and not to pay, because it is a punishment. But the thing that is the advantage to the punishment of having to pay when you go is that the competition forces your prices down and your premiums are less. It's very easy to see how your premiums are less with a high deductible. But I think it works at everywhere along the socioeconomic ladder. I think the ideal thing is that health insurance should be more like term life insurance, but then when you're 20 years old, you might get a 20-year policy or a 30-year health insurance policy with a significant deductible. You pay almost every time you go to the doctor. You pay almost the whole price every time you go to the doctor. But the doctor's fees won't be set then. They'll be negotiated down, and that young person will pay a pittance compared to what they pay. Young people don't need to be paying $10,000 or $12,000 for their insurance. You know, there should be a way for young people to have insurance very cheaply. The insurance companies know the statistics. Most people never end up using or meeting their deductibles on these things. It's like a 20-year-old probably has a 97% chance of reaching 30 without a significant health problem. It's not to say you shouldn't have insurance, but you should have insurance against the unexpected. Insurance originally, the concept of insurance is buying things that are of a very low expectation. Going to the OB next year if you're a woman should be maybe 100% expectation. You don't buy insurance against things that are going to happen. You buy insurance against things that you don't think will happen, like having cancer, like having a bad automobile accident. That's what you want your insurance against, and you want to pay for everything. And it's a hard argument because people are like, I don't want to pay for everything. But the answer would be lower premiums and lowering doctors' fees, hospital fees. Everything would become part of a marketplace if we paid more.
So you think it would be better if we got off of the employer-based risk pool in insurance and did more of an individual?
Yeah, but then I'm not sure exactly how we get to a pool. You want to be part of a pool. Maybe the pools would be belonging to, I don't want to say it because they aren't on the right side of AARP or something like that, some kind of big group, except they're on the wrong side of this issue. But yeah, you know, being part of a doctor's pool or a welder's pool or just any kind of pool. Maybe it's just a group that is a grouping, a private group out there that you could buy into and be part of a pool. That's part of my problem. I'm in a small business and I'm not part of a pool. I only have myself and 2 or 3 employees. So that's a problem. But that is what you need, is you want to be part of a pool, and you want it more individual and less employer-based, because then you have portability. So when you lose your job, if you own it individually, it's still your policy. It goes everywhere with you. We got employer-based because in World War II, they set wage and price controls, and labor wanted more wages, but they wouldn't give it to them. So they said, oh, we'll give you health insurance tied to your employment. The hard part is how you get away from that. I don't want to get rid of the deduction. People have said, oh, let's just take away business's deduction. You know, I'm not sure exactly how we get the transition, but part of the transition is health savings accounts, and that's a lot about what I talk about. Anybody else?
Well, my name's Frank Parker, and I want to thank you and your family for having the courage to step up to the plate. Jimmy Carter, Vice President, I learned a lot.
Thank you.
I'm the veteran, I'm the grandfather, I'm a grade, 9 hard work. I have a great deal of concern for my grandchildren. I do not want to be known as the generation that allowed tyranny to prevail. The question as far as healthcare, I'd like to ask, where do you stand on the antitrust laws concerning the insurance companies? Thanks.
Right. The question was about antitrust laws and insurance companies. I think most of the time the antitrust laws have not done us a good service, whether they're applied or not applied. They tend to be used by one competitor against another competitor. One very big business sues another business. They use the antitrust laws to try to prevent them from getting a competitive advantage. So I don't know if there is an answer necessarily for insurance within the antitrust laws.
First president I ever voted for was Dwight David Eisenhower. So I've lived through the period before Medicare and after Medicare. I think you put your finger on the central problem, that is the government, the bureaucracy, the control people have decided to put the control on costs. They're setting your rates via initially the Medicare program. They're setting everybody's rates. It's common sense to have HSAs. It's common sense to allow insurance portability. A lot of the details we've heard today are common sense. They're not going to fix the fundamental problem. How do we get the government totally out of health insurance and health care?
A good question. I think you have to first thing you need to do is change quite a few faces in Washington and in Frankfurt. But that's what this is about. I mean, think about it. There's a football game going on, and we've got over 100 people out here to listen to some, boring policy speak about healthcare. But we're doing it because we're worried about our country. I think people are out here because the debt is consuming our country, and here we have people in Washington just going to add another $800 billion program and blithely go on their way and say, everything will be okay. Your stimulus check is in the mail. Just go to the mall. I mean, that's their answer. Their economic plan is go to the mall. It'll be okay. I tell people sometimes it's sort of like the Romans gave us bread and circus to distract the mob from the problems of the Roman Empire. Now they give us cash for clunkers and stimulus checks. And go to the mall.
And that's both parties saying.
Yeah, sometimes. You're right.
Is it state law or federal law that's preventing us from buying insurance across state lines? And if it's state law, what do you propose that we do without sort of trampling on states' rights to make their own laws?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been thinking more about it because I've gotten this question a couple times because I am a big believer in states' rights. Do we want the federal government telling states what to do? Probably not. But I do think that, for example, the Commerce Clause is abused. It allows the federal government to come in and do a lot of things they shouldn't be doing. But the one thing the Commerce Clause was intended to do was to protect free trade between the states. And so if there are state laws that say that you cannot sell insurance here that originates in Florida, then I think maybe the federal government or the Supreme Court should strike down laws like that as being against the Commerce Clause, which prevents free and open trade. So I think you could allow insurance to be sold, because see, sometimes they pass mandates. In '94, when they passed the law in Kentucky, you had to have pregnancy coverage in every insurance policy. So see, if they do that, and I'm a 75-year-old woman and I've had my children, I don't want pregnancy coverage anymore. Shouldn't I be able to buy it from Florida where they don't force me to have pregnancy coverage? Or what if it's in vitro coverage? Extraordinarily expensive, and I've either had my family or I just don't want to pay that much to have in vitro fertilization part of my insurance. Should I not have the right to buy it across state lines? But do you want the federal government coming into the states and regulating insurance companies? You know, you probably don't. So you have to be careful how we go about opening up trade. But I think if you look at it as a trade issue, Supreme Court could rule on that in that fashion. Over against the wall.
Can you comment on kind of the hidden effects that this bill that they've got now will have on small community hospitals? My understanding is it's going to kill them.
On small hospitals?
Yeah. The financial effects that this bill will have on small hospitals is effectively over a very short period of time. That function to shut them down.
Right. Well, I think what happens is the more people you have in a public system, the more there's a squeeze for dollars. If you talk to people who have nursing homes and hospitals, you see that they're already squeezing fees and have been for years and years. So what makes no sense to me is how you're going to create a new program, an $800 billion program. It's not going to cost anything, it's not going to add to the debt, and it's not going to cause further pressure on the system. It makes no sense. There's already an automatic law that reduces physicians' fees by like 8 or 9% every year under Medicare. And every year for like the last 10 years they have a big battle and they rescind that 8 or 9% in December usually. But I don't know how they're going to do it. There's just too much pressure on a system that, you know, and then we have a deficit in our country of $1.75 trillion. So it just doesn't add up. And so I think, yes, there'll be more pressure on hospitals. It'll put more people out of business, more pressure. The other thing is there's a pressure on, we have 10% unemployment. And let's say that 17 employees, you have to get the insurance, 16 you don't. That means the 17th employee, there's a great disincentive to hire the 17th employee. So if you're the 17th person looking for a job in a small business, you don't get it. And sort of what Bastiat talked about, the seen and the unseen. We'll see everybody having insurance, but we won't see the guy or the man or woman who didn't get the job. It's like minimum wage. Everybody says, oh yes, we should have $10 minimum wage. Why not have $20 minimum wage? The problem is you don't see, you see that, yeah, some people got their wages increased, but you don't see that the McDonald's that had 40 employees now is going to have 30 or now going to have 20. It creates unemployment. We get these humanitarian ideas, free health care for everyone, but we don't understand the consequences of making something free means that ultimately it's overused. There's too much money spent, there's not enough money, so then it has to be rationed. And that's what it leads to.
I'd like to make a statement to reinforce that. Up until recently, I lived in Western New York, Buffalo, Niagara Falls area. And when I went over to Canada briefly, I injured myself. It's not a rumor that if you are injured in Canada, you have to go to the hospitals there for even something as life-threatening as getting shot or stabbed. It's very easy for you to be stuck in the ambulance for up to 8 hours before you're even put into the hospital. My injury was minor, and I told them flat out I would be taking the time to go back across the border, have dinner, drop my friends off, before I go to a United States hospital, knowing I would be out of there before I would even be seen in Canada. If this health reform goes through, that would be the exact same thing here. Because everything will be overused. And we don't have the background, we don't have the infrastructure to handle it. We see it in other countries, why it is that the people are not raising their voices enough to get this overturned.
Right. There are companies in Michigan, private for-profit companies, that their whole job is to facilitate Canadians coming across the border to have the heart surgery. There's a guy on YouTube, you can look it up, that's got a kidney stone, and they've got a YouTube of him over like a month. he keeps going to the ER in Canada, and they just give him morphine or whatever to try to kill his pain, but they don't do anything about his kidney stones because he's waiting in line for lithotripsy or a urologist to go in there and get the stone. He'd be treated within a few days in our country, you know. And I think the one thing that they don't realize, and the Democrats are going to get a whole lot of wind of, is Americans are a pretty independent breed. We all inherited it from a bunch of radicals who moved over here to get away from Europe. We're not going to be as docile, I think, as the Europeans, and you know, like lemmings being led to slaughter. There's people down here. We want to get the health care way we want it. You know, we want to make decisions with us and our doctor, and we're not going to be told. I think there's going to be a lot of unhappiness in our country that people won't put up with it.
I've heard your speeches a couple times, and I've heard you talk about a high deductible system. What legislation needs to be passed or repealed to get to that high deductible system? And if the current bill passes, are we going to be too far socialist to even get back to where we need to be?
Good question. Some of it's tax law. For example, there are only certain plans that can be sold under the Approved Health Savings Act that came about a few years ago. Now, one good thing they did is it used to be you had to spend your money by the end of the year. And a lot of companies would have this, and you'd put money, and then all the money disappears if you don't spend it. Now it goes year to year. It's like all my kids are having braces, and so I put money in every month, but it rolls over, so I don't have to be careful about when I spend it. So that's been good. But most of it's tax law, and some of it is legislation expanding the use of health savings account to more and more people. But a lot of it's tax law and can be done through legislation. The second question is, will it be too late? I've been talking a lot in my speeches lately about a Reagan story, and Reagan tells his story about can you repeal a program once it's enacted, and he tells the story of it in England. They set up a civil service position in 1803, and they have a guy stand on the cliffs of Dover, and he was going to ring a bell when he saw Napoleon coming. They got rid of it finally in 1945. So it's hard to get rid of programs. It's easier to stop them than it is to bring those back. And I told that story not too long ago over in Louisville, and a woman who's the chairman of the party in Oldham County came up to me and she said, well, we've done it one time. And I had forgotten about this, but in 1988 they passed a catastrophic insurance bill that Kennedy got through, and we actually did repeal it within 6 months. You can't do it unless you take possession of at least one house, either the House or the Senate up there. But really you need a clean sweep. We need something like 1994 when we got both houses of the House and the Senate. Something that dramatic, we could repeal this. But that's what it's going to take. And I think we're going to have a good year. I don't know if it can be that big, but I hope it can be that big.
I work for a large publicly funded hospital in the area, and I know that for a long time it's difficult for us to attract particularly mid-level practitioners like nurse practitioners, physician assistants, because being publicly funded we pay less. There are people who are attracted to our facility because we are also an educational institution, but ultimately people work for money, and people who spend a lot of money on their educations want a lot of money on their paychecks. Has the Congress addressed the expectation that people will leave the healthcare fields? There will be people who will either leave it, or subsequently we won't be attracting new people into it if we go to such a situation. I mean, there are days that we're swamped already and there's no empty beds. How do you attract people in when there's going to be a mass influx of people who get free health care with workers who will probably see their pay go down even more?
Right. Yeah, it's all levels of employees, because everywhere there's a pinch. They probably should look at the Cuban system. They pay the doctors $100 a month. I don't know why they're complaining, But it affects everywhere. But the whole thing is it's this overall squeeze. And anybody that's involved with hospital administration or any part of hospitals or medicine realizes that there's already a squeeze. It's been going on for 10 or 15 years now. And a lot of them are struggling to make ends meet because the fees are being reduced, and have been. It's an ongoing process. So that's the real question, is how can they have their head in the sand and say, we're going to do this now, it's not going to cost anything, it's not going to put more burden on the system. It will be more burden. It's going to be higher premiums for everybody, or higher taxes, or lower payments, and more of a squeeze, and ultimately you will lose people who won't go into the profession because they can't pay back their $200,000 worth of loans they have for school.
Can you comment on the fact that whether it's a fact or not, that we already have a National Health Board in place and staffed, and we also have the National Healthcare Database in place and staffed, and this was all put in the stimulus bill and passed with the stimulus bill.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but that's a very good point. In the stimulus bill they passed, and I'm not sure I can come up with a name, it's the federal something committee, yeah, that is already in place to make a lot of these decisions on health care. And once again, that's another example of people not reading the bill. That bill was printed at midnight and passed by the next morning, and nobody read it. And so it's one of the things I've signed on to a reform movement called Read the Bills Act. We should sign a statement saying you've read the bill before you vote on it.
It's hard for a congressman or a senator to do that when they're given a deadline of 12 hours.
Yeah, like the Democrats said, oh, we're going to give you 72 hours. 72 hours to read a 2,000-page bill that really you have to have the Federal Register with you, which is 79,000 pages. So you have to be able to somehow read through, because when it says they're going to amend Section 42,030B, you've got to know what that section was. You can't read these bills. It's virtually impossible. And so I think the waiting period should be longer. I'm going to introduce something that says they wait 20 days for every page of bill. So if you have a 1,000-page bill, they're going to wait 50 days. I think that'll settle up.
I think what you should sign, I mean, I don't think you can read every page of the bill. No way. But you can at least promise that your staff will summarize every part, every page of that bill. And you have studied the summaries that they presented to you.
I think you're right. And some of what I say is hyperbole, but we have to slow the process down.
Right, exactly.
You know, the thing is, and I think these are good government type of issues that will cross party lines. It's not just Republicans that are unhappy about the size and length of the bills and how fast they go through them. It appears that nobody knows what's in the bills. It's Democrats too. It's independents. It's moderates. You name it. People are unhappy about government. That's what this whole Tea Party movement's about. 4,000 people in Louisville went to a Tea Party. 1,500, 2,000 came to a Tea Party in Lexington. People are unhappy. They're not all Republicans. They're not all Republican organizers. They're people that are unhappy about what's going on in government, want to take their government back. And I feel a part of that movement, and I think it's a movement that's going to be big enough that maybe we can transform things in Washington.
Dr. Paul, another question. I understand media love this White House of Vietnam, but I can understand how Republican Party not exposed what's going on in the Indian affair. In Indian, they have single payer in Indian reservations. They have government medical, and nobody talk about this. Yeah. If you want cure, you have to be before July, if I'm not mistaken. After July, you have to wait until January.
Yeah, I thought maybe one way we could get them to learn a little faster, since they seem to be slow learners, is that maybe the congressmen should go to the VA or to the Indian reservations and get their health care, and maybe they should get the congressional health care. I think there's one in the back over here. I'm about worn out anyway. Thank you very much for coming.